I am so proud to have here tonight a great person. This guy is a founder, he's a technologist. He has been studying technology, particularly networks, social networks, together with social behavior and neuroscience. He has founded at least 3 startups. He's a Young Technology Award. He has worked with many companies, of course, one particular company which is very, very important, Bayer. He also has been working. I am so proud to have you here tonight, Mark. Thank you so much for being with us. Please welcome with me, Mark Turrell.
Half full. How many people think this is half full? How many people think half empty? How many of you know the correct answer? Because obviously the correct answer is that?
Half full.
It's completely full. It's half full of liquid and half full of air. It turns out that the optimists are right, and everybody else is wrong. Now, I'd like us to bear this in mind because we're going to be talking today about 10 areas of technology, and I've picked out certain technologies that I think will be very profound over the next 10 years. Some things will make us very scared, and genuinely scared. Some of these things are huge opportunities. So this conversation, this topic that we'll talk about today, we've got plenty of time for questions afterwards, will be around technology, the future of technology, but particularly as we think of these things, I'd like us to think about the implications for business, the implications for society, but then also the implications for us as individuals. No idea where the gadget works? There we go. Technology, humans' ability to harness fire. Just imagine if you were a VC actually in Silicon Valley, probably you wouldn't have funded fire. It's not protectable, yet you can't do this thing. And yet humans' ability to harness fire, electricity, magnets, all of these things are technologies that have profoundly made a shocking difference to us as human beings. And I would argue, we're not done yet. I actually believe that we're about to see a renaissance of technology development across all areas. And just almost to give us to kick us off and thinking about, these are big thoughts. I'd like us to start thinking about humanity as almost a sort of set of human beings, but we're going to use the analogy of the human brain. So within our brain, we have these specialized brain cells called neurons, and the neurons are connected by special links called synapses. Now, for those of you that are neuroscientists, obviously it's more difficult than that, but this is purely an analogy. So we have these neurons and we have these synapses. It turns out that chimpanzees also have neurons and synapses, and it turns out in terms of neurons used for thinking, we have about pound for pound the same number of neurons for thinking as a chimpanzee does. Now, a chimpanzee is able to peel bananas with its feet. A feat that none of you here, some of you this guy certainly tried to attempt that once. But we can't do that. At the same time, we build space rockets. We do all kinds of things that are dramatically different. So what makes a difference between a chimp and a human? Because it's not the number of neurons. It turns out it's the number of connections between each neuron. An adult chimpanzee has 2,500 synaptic connections between each neuron. Now this is pretty much the same as a newborn baby. And if any of us have had children beforehand, we know that children are basically useless until they hit about 24. God, how much trouble will make it? It's going to get worse. An adult human being, we have about 8,000 synaptic connections on average between each neuron. What makes us smart as a human is not the number of neurons, it's the huge amount of connections we have between each neuron. I would argue that humanity has been basically wired as a chimpanzee up until the last 5 years. What does this mean? There was an Indian professor who came up with the idea for black holes. And when he presented this incredible research to the head of the Royal Astronomical Society, the head of the Royal Astronomical Society, who kind of controlled where the budget would go to, where the research would go to, saying, this is a great idea. I'll let you present it at my next conference as long as I can make the first response. What he didn't reveal was that he was a racist and he hated Indians. And so for 15 years there was very little research going into black holes because of one individual who decided that he didn't like this thing. This is pretty much how humanity has been structured until today. Because with Facebook, with Twitter, with Wi-Fi, with smartphones, with Wikipedia, with Google, and, we're basically rewiring ourselves as a planet and a human race. And we're beginning to see this in the huge, massive technology innovations that is absolutely astounding in every single one of the areas, but we're basically advancing in technology across huge ranges of areas, and that's what we're talking to you today. So just to recap on that before we delve into the technologies, technologies really do define us and our society. They define how we interact with each other. There are things that we can do now by talking with loved ones at a distance. In the past, we could try to send smoke signals, but obviously it's much more difficult with WhatsApp, much easier with WhatsApp. Technologies are dramatically changing our behaviors. I'm sure almost all of us here have had dinners where you take 5-minute messaging breaks. We never used to do that beforehand. I mean, there wasn't a messaging break. I think what's also interesting, if one looks at future technologies, is the future is already here. The fax machine, for example, was being used in the 1920s to communicate information between police stations about criminals and fingerprints that they found. It took until the 1970s and 80s before it became popular. What's very interesting, if you look, and you look closely enough, the future technologies are all here. They will just take a while before they propagate, and not everything will propagate. But these impacts can be absolutely profound. They can hugely change us in almost every aspect of society, every single thing. And probably some of you know what this is. The iPhone came out in, June 2007? Many of you will have this, or its alternate versions. This has sold 800 million copies in the last 10 years. I remember going to an economist conference where there was a journalist, one of the absolute experts in technology and mobile communications, who believed that there would never be a need for a device that could do a calculator and play a game and do learn. There was just no need. You have a phone. I don't make phone calls. I use this thing for everything other than phone calls. Because you can always do Skype and WhatsApp and now. So these are just one technology which is a platform which has opened up the possibilities for tons and tons of others. But this is old. And then also like us to think about when we look at technologies a few things. So here's some things that I find interesting. Human adoption of these things. Do you remember walking down the street, watching somebody talk to themselves? Yeah, absolutely, yeah, definitely, should definitely do that. With a little blue glowing thing in their ear. Anybody remember that? Bluetooth headsets? They're so uncool now, by the way. Human adaptation of technology is very important. Many technologies don't get adopted by humans. I was in Latvia looking at a really good medical device company that had developed a way for getting rid of cold sores using light. Fascinating technology. The thing is that the device they had looked like a scary skeletal finger. And that was even worse because they were trying to sell it to women. How many women would like to have skeletal hands? Put up your claws? No. It's a terrible thing. So understanding how technologies get adopted by humans is very important. System adoption then becomes even more interesting. When we look at things like electric vehicles, there is a whole system of delivering liquid energy. And that system is massively pervasive. What this means is that some of you may have Teslas, and if those of you who've got a Tesla will know that you pretty much have to program where you go on holiday based on your charging stations that you can find. Now, of course, this is a joke, but yet this is a practical thing that people have to face, because right now, to switch people from liquid fuel, liquid energy, is a huge system change. And very often, those system change things can take a while. And after all, One of the first electric forms of public transport was the electric tram company in London in 1919. And they were doing swap-in, swap-out batteries even in 1919. So right now, sometimes fighting a system is huge. I think it's interesting also to look at technology between fundamental needs, fundamental human needs, and created needs by people that need to sell an extra 4% of revenue this year. I'm much more interested in these fundamental needs, the need to communicate, the need to be loved, the need to feel connected. These are fundamental human needs. The need to eat, pretty fundamental. The created needs are the ones that say, how do I make you be upset about the shoes that you have so you can buy another pair next year, and the year after that, and the year after that, and consume more stuff. So I'm much more interested in technologies for these fundamental needs. Another thing I then find fascinating is the switch between dematerializing things and having them rematerialize in many places. I remember the first time I came across 3D printing was when I was doing some work at Unilever. And Unilever had a packaging division. And they were one of the first people to invest in a cross-company 3D printing platform. And I was very confused. Why would Unilever do this? They said, well, we have an office in London that designs new packaging. And we would used to make, 15 copies, and then send them by FedEx to the places around the world to do focus groups. But that obviously adds a month and a half to the process. By being very early adopters of 3D printing, they could have a design, mock it up, send the code off to get it 3D printed in all the locations at the same time, immediately do a focus group, and immediately get feedback to change it. They said this saves us masses of money and saves us huge amounts of time and becomes more responsive. So I then see the ability to dematerialize things, to take things from the physical into ones and zeros, to then have these things be shared, and then have them replicate and physically instantiate themselves, also very interesting. And the last one, again, before I get into the meat, there is a lot of meat in here, is global spread. And I think this is interesting. We talked about the chimpanzee brain and the human brain. Right now, if Europe doesn't want to do it, China will. It's obvious, China will. And if you're a bright entrepreneur, and you're doing it in Europe, and Europe says no, go to China. Not that hard. So right now, we're living in a very, very strange world. I think equally strange is that Berlin is a nice European city. It's cheap. Now, if you live in Berlin, it's clearly not as cheap as it used to be. But this is reasonably inexpensive. I've been looking at companies like General Electric, Philips, who are trying to sell into the developing world, and they have dramatically less money. Well, what's been interesting is you can't sell, a 20-year-old second-hand piece of kit that you made in Germany into India. Even that's too expensive. And so I've been looking at how the major corporates have been doing more and more research locally, pretty much designing for local needs. Now, what's interesting is that these technologies may end up being 85% as good as what we're doing over here in the expensive part of the world, but they're also 85 to 95% cheaper. And we are seeing the spread of companies. It started off with Tata, Infosys, and the tech companies being big in India and coming over here. We'll see more and more innovations and technology coming over in the same way. So these are just some bigger thoughts. But now I'm going to give us some areas of focus, and this will be the technologies we're going to delve into. And so we're going to be talking about these things. We're going to be talking about food, health, business, space, final frontier, computing, AI, education, entertainment, citizens, and love. But let's start with food. I don't want to make anybody hungry. Let's kick off with 3D printed food. So really this feels a little bit like Star Trek. But the ability to have, you've got, I was not sure whether I should have the robot hands that are making the food for you. The 3D printed food. But in fact with the technology, I think the 3D printed food is not as interesting at all as one technology I picked out that we certainly should be looking at. And that's this one. Who knows what this is? Yeah, this is lab-produced beef burger. So this is taking beef cells and producing beef in the laboratory. So no need for cows, which means no need to produce massive amounts of arable land for wheat. I was reading today that to produce 1 kilogram of beef, costs in the United States 30 kilograms of CO2. They do a lot of farting. This doesn't fart. As we have countries industrializing like China, people, as they get wealthier, would like to have more meat. We can't afford it, but we can afford this. So now it is entirely plausible that your biggest meat-producing factory could be an office, just like obviously a safe, secure office sort of sitting down the road, and it's producing beef for you. Now I believe that this is much more plausible for us to be eating than, let's say, insects. Because whilst insects are a great source of protein, we'll be using them for flour, I'm not sure if we're going to be eating cockroach bugs. Because of the human adoption problem. But so lab-produced beef, I think, is a big technology to watch out for. Let's move on to health. Very appropriate, we're talking about this here. So, who knows what the big blob thing over there is? And no, it's not a penis. I'm trying to avoid the negative questions beforehand. I realise this is a corporate environment. Anyone know what this is? Kidney. Exactly. This is a proto-kidney. It is a 3D printed proto-kidney. This is a substrate to print ears with your own cells. This is a 3D printed bone, printed again with your own stem cells. There's a company in New York that does this. This is technology that is here now. Now, clearly it's going to be more. I go to the World Economic Forum at Davos every year, and it's interesting to see the rich and powerful. But one of the things that I've realized is that many of those people will be alive until they're 200. They won't die. Because of things like this. Because now it means we'll be able to, if you look at, let's say, the rejection rate of implants, of transplants, is very, very high. The effects on other pieces of the health. But if you're able to basically print your own bones, well, somebody else will print it for you, apart from some of you that work here. Print your own organs. This is an absolute game changer. And these are technologies that are just bubbling on right now, but certainly in 10 years' time, it would not be abnormal, and some of us would definitely need to get new livers. Anyone know what this is?
Gene editing.
CRISPR, absolutely. CRISPR is, anybody want to explain CRISPR very easily? This is gene editing at a like laser point scale. Now let us say, let's use a serious example and a trivial example. Let us say you have a child that has just been born that has a genetic weakness that is causing them to have whatever, leukemia at the age of 12 months. Well, with CRISPR you'll be able to go in, gradually we know more and more about how DNA works, which bits do what. So now you could find, pretty much take the child's DNA, snip out the bits you don't like, snip in the good bits, stick it into a virus, infect it, and child cured. I was just reading today about how at Great Ormond Street they've been looking at T cells, pretty much genetically engineered T cells, to help cure cancer in leukemia patients. This is today. But now let's go trivial. Let's say that you want to have green eyes. You could easily be going into a shop in 10 years' time and say, yeah, I like green eyes because I'm going to a party. We'll be living in a very, very strange world with CRISPR, and in fact, let's look at the pharmaceutical industry. If you can pretty much edit at gene level and make a change across the entire body, do we really want to be taking little bits of drugs that extend our life by 2 months, if we have cancer? When we can actually get rid of the stuff in the first place. This is an absolute game-changing technology. It totally could change the way that we do pharmaceuticals and many, many types of procedures and everything else. So CRISPR is definitely one of those technologies you all have to be paying attention to, in a good way. Let's talk business. This was looking at, this is a map, like a live map. I mean, it's not live up here, but this is looking at all of the ships going around the Mediterranean. This is now very interesting. We already have the technology with sensors to be able to see where everything is instantly. And as you have miniaturization of components, you end up being able to measure air pollution. You're able to measure all kinds of heat, temperature, and have the data being fed immediately. Even I've just been doing some more research, so one of the top MIT technologies for 2016 is wireless electricity. Now this, of course, has been forecast by Tesla, not the Elon Musk version of Tesla, but Tesla. He was a real person. But right now, if you're able to pretty much have electricity be spread wirelessly, there's no need for batteries for many of these devices. And it totally changes the way that we can actually have sort of Internet of Things and information. Again, the stuff is already here. We're going to see billions and billions of sensors coming out there. Drone thing? So, and how many of you have seen drone surfing? Drone surfboarding? They're wicked new. So, you're living in a flat country, it's snowing, it's kind of boring going. But now with high-powered drones, people are now actually snowboarding with drones. That's wicked cool. It's good if you live in a flat place like Berlin. But there's going to be some weird things. So I did a thought experiment. So about a year and a half ago, there was a set of drones flying around high-security places in Paris. And still to this day, nobody knew how or why. But I began to imagine a thought experiment. So first of all, it wasn't me. Okay. But I imagined a thought experiment where you could build one program that says, what is the weather like today? Is it safe to fly? Another program says, go into Wikipedia, make a list of buildings. Another thing is a random number generated to say, where will you fly to? Another one says, should you take a picture, should you take live streaming video, or do nothing? And you can have a fully autonomous drone going off to go do stuff. Already in London, I just saw today that they're talking about drone delivery systems, these little sort of gadget things sitting on the ground, which clearly the Brits will try to kick. Feels like it deserves it. But I mean, we're looking at drone automation. I've got another startup that I was mentoring is doing basically helicopter-sized drones, but about a third of the size of helicopters. But it would be able to survey all kinds of secure infrastructures, electricity infrastructures, and it could do it near constantly. Right now, drones, we will see them more and more happening. These are autonomous robotic devices, and they will do more and more stuff. And in fact, there is the logic that in the factory of the future, the only sort of sense of sort of organic life will be a man, person. I hope it should be at least half women. But it'll be a person and a dog. And the man is there to feed the dog, and the dog is there to bite the man if it tries to touch any of the machines. Our future attendees. Now, as we begin to just look at that as just as a thought, as we begin to look at manufacturing, we're going to be talking about construction in just a second. There are many, many people that are employed in these mundane jobs of stamp, pickup, stamp, pickup, stamp, pickup. And sure, it must be mind-numbingly boring being in an Amazon factory as a distribution person where you're basically a human robot. You won't be a human robot for very long. We'll talk about the implications of that later. This is 3D printing, but this is a variety. So you can actually have multi-stream 3D printing. We can stream several different materials at the same time. Even more exciting than that is embedded 3D printing. So you can take pre-made things like microchips and actually embed them in place. So you can actually print, like we're just beginning to see the first 3D printed cell phones that are fully printed. There's no assembly needed. This is now what will happen in the future. This is very close. Anybody guess what this is?
Buildings.
These are the pieces of a 3D printed skyscraper. In China, they built a 15-story skyscraper fully functioning in 3 days. Now this particular thing, this is the low-end technology. So this is where they have an office, like a physical warehouse, and they're actually 3D printing the substrate. I've been looking at some technology out of Russia, which it does in a big circle, and they're able to print the cement and the plastic for the pipes at the same time. And I've been speaking to people in the real estate, and they say, you know there's millions of jobs in construction? Yeah. We'll need to find something else for people to go do. It's okay, we'll finish on entertainment and love, don't worry. Any idea what this is? This is a data set. Any idea? Trades on Wall Street, exactly. How many minutes, or seconds, or hours, or days?
I think that's 1 second. 2-3 minutes.
Yeah, it's a minute. This is 1 minute of NASDAQ trading, just NASDAQ, not even all of it. Just 1 minute. Now, one of the things that I find fascinating about it, there's something called high-frequency trading. Now, actually, money, we all hold money dear. I'm sure if I were to put 10,000 euros of notes here, there'd be a mini riot, possibly. I'm not going to do that, don't worry. So we clearly hold money dear. It's one of the things that almost like sort of, it's human energy. A couple of years ago, it was looked at to say, okay, if you look at trading on Wall Street by volume, by value, by transaction values, who is doing the trading? And it turns out that over 70% is done by high-frequency trading or algorithm trading. What does this mean? Well, this means that robots who are writing their own code are trading with other robots who are also writing their own code. Robots trading with other robots. This is now. As we begin to look, the ability for, okay, like somebody to calculate whatever, 25 billion multiplied by 7.8. Anybody? Bueller, something like that. So, it was a reference to an old movie. The thing is that a computer can calculate billions of things in seconds. Far better than we as humans can do. They can hold numbers in place. They can do multiple calculations in place. We will see more and more of this stuff. To the extent that, as it begins to go to corporate, now I was having a conversation at one of the higher floors upstairs, and we were discussing this. Hi, I am your new head of planning and operations. For those of you who believe you're safe in middle management, because hell, nobody knows how to stall a meeting better than me. We will see more and more use of artificial intelligence and other systems in the workplace. It is inevitable. The fact that you've got people trying to forecast chip demand for wafer chips in 2 years' time can be done better by a computer. Because at the moment you're upset because your girlfriend forget your birthday. A computer doesn't care and it doesn't sleep. And it's got lots of friends that can think exactly like it. So yes, this is your, thank you. For some companies, I do realize not here, but this is actually a look of your current head of HR. Space. Now there's lots of stuff I can go to space. But just to think about space, let's imagine that today, this weekend we're going to go shopping. And we're going to spend 100 euros on shopping. Let us imagine that it cost us 97 euros to get to the store, and we've only got 3 euros to spend. That is what space is like. Until this thing. This is SpaceX's reusable rocket. This was its first successful launch, and hopefully they have many, many more. The problem with space is that we have this thing called gravity, which means that it's really, really expensive pushing stuff up into space. So expensive that we don't do it very often. Well, by what Elon Musk is doing with SpaceX and the other engineers there, by getting reusable rockets, is you can reduce the cost of going into space to around about $200,000. And at that level, we can do some very interesting stuff in space. Moon, Mars, and I could put a whole bunch of other space technologies in there, but the key thing is the cost of getting it upwards. So things like this are a real game changer, so definitely look out for SpaceX in this. Let's go into computing. So now this is looking at almost like the core infrastructure that we have. Anybody know what this is? This is a light gate. So normally a computer chip has got like some electricity pulses, ding, ding, ding. This is a computer driven by light, which works much faster than electricity. It works at the speed of light. So right now we're seeing at the core parts of technology things going dramatically quicker. Even faster than light to some extent. This is Google's quantum chip, where things don't even move. Just because one thing is left, the other one automatically goes right. I didn't show we've been looking at some technology now that pretty much can encode data onto DNA. And so now I was looking at, for something the size of a teaspoon, you can put all the data this planet has ever created onto a teaspoonful of DNA. And with new glass technologies, you can have it stored in a way that will not be destroyed for 1 billion years. There's a lot of new stuff in computing coming out. that will, even if we're talking about a world of massive amounts of data and everything else, we're seeing huge changes in these areas. Let's talk about AI. How many of you remember Atari games? And if you haven't done them yet, it's a great retro thing to do. Get a bottle of wine, do a couple of shots, play some Space Invaders, great fun. So Google invested in a company called DeepMind. They bought a company. So DeepMind is a generalized artificial intelligence system. Now AI has gone through 3 different generations, the way that I look at it. In the 1950s and 60s, there was expert AI. What it would do is it would put a whole bunch of human experts in a room, the computer would figure out how the humans did things, and then shockingly realize that humans are idiots. The second generation was brute horsepower and probability. And the best example of that was Deep Blue from IBM. And there was a seminal moment in whatever, machine history. Be interesting being a machine historian in 20 years' time. But finally, a computer beat the world's best chess player at chess, the most complicated game imagined. Apart from Go, we'll talk about that in a second. Well, the reason why Kasparov lost this game in 1997 was a bug. So Kasparov was actually winning up until that time. And then the computer in one of the games played a really stupid move. Just like, what the fucking... And I mean, he won the game. I mean, he destroyed the computer. Like, what the... And he was convinced that there was cheating going on. It actually turned out that the way that the computer had been written was a very clever way. What it said was that if there is a bug, make a list of legal moves and pick one at random. Now, as we begin to see this, we begin to almost see about how human beings learn. We learn through pattern recognition. Holding child says, I want to go into the middle of a car. Don't do that, splat. Dangerous. Stand here. Oh, look, there's a fire. No, don't do that, hot. Basic stuff. Try things out, pattern learning. Well, right now what we're seeing with this new generation of artificial intelligence is much more pattern recognition the way that a child learns things. Just basically supercharged. So DeepMind was given Atari, it was given 40 or so Atari games about a year ago. And it was given a visual processing engine, so it could see what was on the screen. And all it was told is, figure it out. It was not told how any of the games work, and in 3 days, it beat every single game. Remember, it didn't know what the game was. But it quite quickly worked out there's a number at the top of the screen. If I move left, it does this. If I do right, it will do that. What it was able to do was figure out, without knowing anything about any of the games, how to beat every single one in 3 days. This is 2015 technology. Right now, if any of you follow, DeepMind is now playing Go, which cannot be beaten by brute force. But right now, the DeepMind is already better than the best player in Europe. And it will soon, in all likelihood, destroy the best human player. And as the DeepMind researchers are describing it, a good human can see 1,000 Go games in a year. The same computer can process 3 billion of those games in around 10 minutes. And share it with its friend. And I've begun to almost sort of think about, I'll go into that in a second. I began to think about, there'll be a day, let's say 15 years' time, and on this day there'll be 100,000 babies produced and 100,000 robots produced. Now, as I've insultingly said that humans are useless until they're in their mid-20s. But it does certainly take at least 20 years for a human being to become productive the way that society treats them today. When the robot comes off the line, it'll be the smartest robot that has ever existed, as will all of its friends, and it can be updated instantly. I'm suggesting have friends with farms in different continents, and make sure you keep your iPads charged up, because hopefully the machines will like you more. Anyway, let's look at AI and ethics. Now, many of you will have had this thing. If you've ever done a business studies class, they do occasionally teach you ethics. It is often a class that many people skip, depending on the MBA that you do. But the dilemma is that, so there's a car that's driving. It's going to drive straight and it's going to kill 8 children. Or it can veer to the side and kill the driver. Okay, now, show of hands quickly, so we know the situation. There's a driver that's going there. How many people think we should kill the 8 kids? How many people think we should kill the driver? Okay, now I'm going to revise it. You're the driver. So, this is a serious stuff. Right now, there's now one of the legal entities in the United States have now decided that a Google self-driving car, the driver is the computer. So I'm not sure what that means. If it causes an infraction, what are you going to do? Lock up a Dell laptop? This is today. There's some very, very weird stuff. So MIT is actually doing a study to see, can we somehow guide machines? I personally believe that, I mean, it's probably too late, but were we to give machines human values, we'll all be dead. All that a machine will need to do is connect to the internet to find out that many human beings are defined by how much we like. Scary times. And likely inevitable as well. Now let's talk about education. Now, there are many things that we can talk about, how we will educate our young people, how we will educate in the workforce. But this is my vision of technology. Now, here's what I think. Now, this is a very controversial view, but this is what I think. Because clearly education is an important topic, and this is what I've got. Yes, this is 1930s Berlin school. Movie is This is when we go back into the system eco-change. The issue there is that there is such a lethargy, such a mass around how people are being educated, that even though almost everybody knows that the education system is broken, we have a system that was designed across almost the world, which is designed for teaching Prussians to go work in manufacturing facilities. And to the extent, I can't write. I admit it, I can no longer write anything that I can read. I can type at 85 words a minute, and if you use Google Translate, my stuff can be read in any different language instantly. But I can't write. This would mean that me, like any other children that have got terrible handwriting, will now fail at school. And yet they can still write computer code. And I have 2 sons, and my sons make €100 a month on software testing, which in some countries is more than the teachers would earn, sadly. But I do think that there are opportunities in the education space. I'm almost being deliberately provocative on the educators of the world to do a lot more. We do need to change education to exist in this world, to have a chance of a good future. Last couple of things that I'm going to get to. Entertainment. Now this is going to be great. It's going to be good. Hold rats. This is Microsoft HoloLens, and this is an augmented reality. So pretty much you have the lens on. Anybody know what this thing is here?
Minecraft.
Anybody that's a 10-year-old boy in the room? No? Yeah, Minecraft. By the way, if you haven't looked at Minecraft, Minecraft is not what you think it is. It's very, very, very weird. It looks like it's a game where you dig things and make blocks. But when you start looking at it, it's a whole-blown entertainment world where people watch hours and hours of videos. It's a whole-blown gaming environment. It's also a way that if you need to connect, if you ever speak to mostly young boys, girls you can try it out with, is you just say to them, Minecraft, good thing, bad thing. Let them respond, good thing. Then you say Redstone, like it or not like it. And then they will talk for hours. Because they get really, really into this stuff. So this then is a way of entertainment, and so this is then the sort of the HoloLens. This is a picture from Magic Leap. So Magic Leap is one of those stealth companies that has had $400 million. So it's either a front organization for the mob, plausible, or they'll be doing some other sort of miraculous things with augmented reality. But now I'm going to move on to the last couple of things, so entertainment. Now, entertainment will be useful because if we don't have jobs for people, and we've made food cheaper by getting them eating lab-produced beef instead of the beef sort of nuzzled by people. If we're giving them 3D printed food so they don't even need to go out. But let's now look at, there'll need to be entertainment. Now let's look at citizens. Now this is a scary direction. I think this is a genuinely scary thing. I don't know if any of you have seen what China is now doing and how they're rating their citizens. So many of you, depending on your country, will have a credit score, a credit rating. This is how much money you can borrow and everything else. This is a citizen score. So the Chinese government in the last year have just rolled out a citizen score that would say, how well behaved are you on social media? Actually, I had a scary conversation with somebody to say, how honest are you on your expense forms? So right now, this is an app. People are using this thing. I mean, this is promoted by the Chinese government. What this is now doing is it's creating almost a good citizen score. Now, the implications for society are clearly profound. Bad citizens, bad citizens. They're probably going to be eating the bugs. But these are some technology things that I'm also looking at in the same context of all of these other things. But now, let's end with love. That's very important. We're still humans after all, right? By the way, we're not monkeys. We have a cortex, we are able to think, so the fact that you're caught up in your emotions and I just really had to go do this, remember you're not a monkey. I've been having conversations with people saying, oh, but I really wanted to do this. You're not monkeys. Monkey see, monkey do. We're humans. We have a good brain. We can think about all kinds of stuff. We can control our emotions and behave somewhat rationally. We probably shouldn't be buying houses and making multi-year purchase decisions based on 20 minutes and saying, oh, I really like the flowers outside. Having said that, let's talk about love. And anybody know what this is? Anybody doing it right now? Actually, this isn't even the scariest one. I think a much scarier one is Happen, if anybody's come across Happen. Less so in Berlin, but if you go into some of the big cities where they're using it, you're finding out people in your own office building, like 200 of them. It's fast. So there will be technology being more and more used for love, for romance. Now, let's think about the world in 10 years' time. We're going to be alive, some of us, particularly if you have money, until you're 150 or 200. Marriage, as the structure that we currently have, is this, it's Berlin, so it's not necessarily a monogamous thing, but so marriage as it was invented is 150 years old. The notion of being monogamously married for love is a recent phenomenon in human history. In fact, 100 years ago, 80% of people of all humankind used to get married to their second cousins or less, and 80% of people would get married to people who grew up 10 miles away from where they were born. But now we have the train, now we have EasyJet and Ryanair. We can like mingle a bit. So I think we're going to see profound things that happen. In fact, one of the things on my own life journey, and sort of like either a beer conversation or even in here, so I'll answer any question honestly. I remember I like going out and nightclubbing. It's always fun. And I began to see that people would take pictures in nightclubs. Well, I was following an Israeli company called Face.com that was doing facial recognition tied to Facebook accounts. And it occurred to me that, let's just say that you call up your spouse to say, yeah, I'm kind of tired, I've got the flu, yeah, I'm in New York, but I'm going to take it easy and stay in. Now, before you know it, you have been, somebody's taken a picture of you, you're not even the focus of the picture, it's been uploaded to the internet instantly, it's been face-stamped, geotagged, time-stamped, and gone out over Twitter before you know that the picture is being taken. Now this will lead to fascinating things about our need to be honest and open in today's world. But there are other things. So about 11% of the world's population is celibate. And in fact, if you like a scary statistic, if you look at women between the ages of 40 and 50 who are single, 30% of them do not have sex at all in a given year. And a further 20% of them have sex less than 4 times in a year, which isn't a lot. Now, depending. Also, and in fact, the average number of times, if you're a couple that have been together for 10 years, The average amount of times that couple has sex in a whole year is 10. Now, obviously, some of you are much more impressive than that. That's why it's an average, right? It's an average. Now, what does this mean? Here are some of the implications that I can see as happening. My invisible girlfriend will have you. We're going to end up with some strange things. And in fact, the strangest thing is, if you like, the technology to end on is this one. The love robot. Because if you look at it, people have this need for intimacy. By the way, robots get better and better over time. Latex, you can already buy ersatz humanoids that will have parts, but they just cost $20,000 to $50,000. Company in Japan. Some of you may even have one. Although this isn't a Berlin tech conference hardcore, so I think at the investor conference they have them. But let's now imagine this weird world of dematerializing, rematerializing. Let us say that you have this sort of precious moments with your loved one in your room at home, which has got 3D scanners around it. Let us now imagine that you've programmed the moves of your loved one that can be replicated in your love robot. So that when your loved one is away, you can pretty much power up the love robot and do what you'd like to do with the love robot. Well, then it's actually not too far away to think, you know what? Greatest hits. I've got an X that I'd like to remember again. And then you can download the X. And then, now obviously, we know somebody's going to do this. There's clearly going to be an app store for this thing. So they'd be like, do you want to have young George Clooney or old George Clooney? And then if you pay extra, use a 3D printer to download body parts that would be replaceable. The world of technology. And with that, I'd like to say thank you very much, thinking aloud, and then we'll take some questions. But thank you very much.